What books did I read in the month of March? I don't hear you asking. Well, I read quite a few. Let's talk about them. The first book I finished last month was The Golden Fool by Robin Hobb. I had to check that because I'm at the point now where I have forgotten the names of the books that I'm reading because I'm just ploughing through them. So this is the second book in the Tawny Man trilogy, or 8th book in the overarching realm of the Elderling series by Robin Hobb. This book takes everything that happened in Fool's Errand and essentially deepens it. We're back at Bookkeep. There's political tension simmering in literally every corridor, and Fitz is once again pulled into a web of secrets and loyalty and of course pain. The Fitz and the Fool dynamic is just chef's kiss as ever. It's so intimate and tender and heartbreaking in a way that I really struggle to put into words. I really felt this one. It feels like a love story to some degree, even if it's not a conventional one. They have such a brilliant relationship, and this book just ultimately deepens it more and more. I didn't realise that I could love these guys anymore, and here we are. So in keeping with Robin Hobb's writing style, this is another really character driven, slow but never dull book. It gives you the time and the space to breathe and to feel everything, the weight of memory and the ache of regret and these quiet moments of connection that are just so beautifully done. It's not an action driven fantasy by any means. It's character driven, it's really weighty, it's emotional, and honestly there's something about these books that is just sort of devastating even when nothing that sad is really happening. Robin Hobb is excellent at building this world, and I feel like I've been in these books now and this series for so long that the world building is really beginning to carry its weight. In this book in particular, there was something very clearly spelled out for me that I didn't notice in the Live Ship Traders. In hindsight, it's something that was probably very obvious to the vast majority of readers, but I just didn't see it. I didn't put two and two together. I didn't even know there was two and two to put together, to be honest. It just blew me away when I realised, and it made me rethink so much from the Live Ship Traders. Honestly, it was just such a brilliant little thing within the series that it just honestly blew my mind. And I don't have anybody in my personal life who has read these books, so I just had to kind of put my book down and stare at the wall for a while. It was such a brilliant realization, and I'm actually really glad that I didn't realize all this stuff while I was reading the last trilogy, because I just feel like what I got from this book was incredible. If you've made it this far into the realm of the Elderlings trilogy, I feel like this book is potentially where things really start to unfold, and it has been so worth the time and the emotional investment. Next up then is a teeny tiny Penguin Little Black Classics book, and the book I'm talking about is White Nights by Dostoevsky. So this book contains two little stories, and it is White Nights, which is the titular story within this little book, and then there's a story called Bobak. And to be honest with you pals, I can't even remember what the second story is about, so here I am primarily just going to talk about White Nights, which is a book that has really blown up on social media over the past couple of years. I have heard from others that this story is ultimately quite devastating and relatable, given that it was written quite some time ago. I think this edition as well was translated by Ronald Meyer. So White Nights is basically about a guy who's just wandering around St. Petersburg, and he happens to bump into this young girl, and he's feeling very lonely, and he ends up in this kind of very intense friendship relationship with a stranger that he meets. And on one hand, the atmosphere is really lovely. It has this dreamlike, melancholic vibe that I really love in Russian literature. It's got long walks, it's got late night rendezvous, and it's got this sort of romantic yearning for something that's ultimately just out of reach. But at the same time, I didn't find myself like particularly moved by it, which I don't know, I was expecting more in that regard, but that's the danger of having a book on your shelves that's been really hyped a lot, isn't it? I was really expecting to be swept up in a lot of emotion, and ultimately I think I just felt slightly detached from the characters. I could see what this story was doing, but I just didn't feel immersed and invested in it all that much. The narrator is dramatic in that really kind of early 20s, I've read too much poetry and now I'm spiraling kind of way, and I found that a little bit much at times maybe. And the relationship, it kind of lost me. I just think it was too intense too quickly, which is something I think I find a lot in classics, and it's like insta love only in books that are potentially hundreds of years old, and this book has that in spades, and I think that really draws me out of a story. It just feels very sudden and very idealized and doesn't necessarily work for me. I definitely prefer a slower book, but in saying that, it is a short story, and it's very small, so what am I hoping for really? There are some really beautiful passages in this, especially around things like loneliness and imagination, and if you enjoy introspective, moody little stories that are ultimately really quick reads, this might hit you differently. For me, it was fine. It wasn't a favourite and I didn't hate it. It was grand, and I think for me this was probably very much a victim of the hype. I may have enjoyed this a lot more if I had come across it without knowing that it devastated people, if that makes sense. Next up then is a book that was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2024. It's by an Australian author, Charlotte Wood, and I'm talking about Stone Yard Devotional. So this is one of those books that is really quiet and meditative, and it really lingers. I ultimately gave this book 4 stars. I did find it to be a really rich and really rewarding read. This follows a woman who basically leaves behind her old life and travels to what seems to be a very isolated and insular convent, not as a nun but as this sort of in-between figure who helps out and who observes, and it's like she's a ghost in the place, like she's haunting it almost, and that sort of in-betweenness sort of defines the whole novel. It's slow and very internal and wrestles with things like grief and with guilt and the shape of a life that doesn't neatly fit into any category. Hard relate. Wood's writing is really sparse but also really sharp, and every sentence just feels so considered. There's this quiet tension that's bubbling just beneath the surface, especially as memories from the protagonist's life start to kind of slip in a little bit. It's a story where essentially not much actually happens plot-wise, but emotionally there's so much moving underneath that stillness. But I will warn you, it is very slow and very introspective, which works really well for me. I love books like this, but I know that it won't work for everybody. So if you're looking for a much more plot-heavy book, this won't be for you. But if you're like me and you like a really slow, quiet, introspective, meditative book, this could potentially be for you. And next up then is a book that has been lingering and languishing on my Kindle for such a long time. It is a book that I think so many of you who watch booktube videos will be familiar with. So I'm talking about One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. So this has such a strong setup. It's a gothic fantasy world. It's got ancient magic that's tied to these really mysterious like tarot cards, and it's a magic system that I have never encountered before and haven't really encountered anything like it so far, at the very least. It's got a cursed forest, and it's got this sort of eerie voice that just basically lives within the main character's head. It sounded like something that I would really love, and to be fair to it, there were elements that I really enjoyed. As I've mentioned, the magic system is up there. The atmosphere is really strong, really moody from the get-go. It's eerie, it's moody, it's got like candlelit castle corridors vibes going on, but overall it didn't click in a way that I had hoped for, especially once again given the hype of this book, and it might potentially be another book that has kind of fallen to the wayside and I didn't appreciate as much because there was so much hype around it. I hate when that happens, but anyway, the pacing did to me feel just a little bit uneven, kind of slow at the start, and then suddenly like a whole load of stuff happens and it just picks up, and it's like, whoa, we're getting a lot here all at once. The romance, which does take up quite a significant amount of words in this book. Didn't quite land for me, but again, I'm not really a romance reader, so that again is a me problem, I think. I think it wasn't bad overall as a book, but just maybe a little bit tropey and a little bit predictable, which maybe wouldn't have bothered me if I'd felt more chemistry between the characters. And I feel like the magic system, I did mention that I did enjoy it, but I feel like it had so much more potential, and the concept of these like ancient forbidden cards that hold magic is really novel, but I don't think that it was necessarily explored as deeply as it could have been. Now there is a sequel to this book, so maybe the magic system is deepened and made more sort of understandable and grounded in a way in the next book. I don't know, because I haven't read it yet, but by the end of the book I was a little bit fuzzy still on how this magic actually worked. That said, I can really understand why people love this book. It's got that lovely dark gothic fairy tale vibe. I feel like it's a really good book to read in like autumn. If you're into really atmospheric romances, then this could definitely be a book for you. For me, it was more of a 3-star, like I liked parts of it, but I didn't love it kind of read. Next up then is another young adult fantasy. So I listened to this one on audiobook in spite of it having sat on my physical TBR for such a long time. So I read Twin Crowns by Catherine Doyle and Catherine Weber. A fun fact, I didn't realise Catherine Doyle is actually an Irish author. So that's really cool, because we don't see all that much YA fantasy coming out of Ireland. We have a lot of really heavy hitting literature, but it's nice to see things changed up a little bit. This is a YA fantasy where we follow two twin sisters, but in a fun twist, they have never actually met each other. So they were separated at birth because of this really horrible thing that happened. So one of the sisters still lives in the castle and is in line to become queen. She's a princess. And the other sister is a witch, and she lives in this community that's really very much a community of outcasts, because witches are, shall we say, frowned upon in this world. The witch sister knows that the princess sister exists, but the princess sister has no idea that she has a twin sister. So that does give it a really nice contrast, and I did very much enjoy the banter, especially in the more lighthearted moments. But overall, again, I just didn't care as much as I had hoped to. The plot did feel pretty predictable and probably quite young, which is fine. And the world building for me was probably a little bit surface level, but again, it's a YA book, so that's okay. It just didn't have me feeling incredibly immersed in the way that I would like, but YA, I'm gonna keep shouting that, like, that's alright. The characters, while definitely quite fun, they felt maybe a little bit archetypal too much at times. They're entertaining to be sure, but they didn't have too much depth beyond their tropes, which, look, it's fine. It's definitely kind of what I expected going into it, so it's okay. I was waiting for things to get a bit darker or a bit more emotionally complex, and that didn't really happen. But again, this is just the first book in a series. Is it a duology? Are there more? I don't know. It sort of stayed in this lovely, safe, charming YA zone, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're looking for a cozy, easy fantasy with sisterhood and romance and some light magic, then this might very well be for you. And this is then where my reading plans for March just completely fell apart. Because, of course, Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins was published. And I was like, I'm just going to read all the Hunger Games books. So I did. Now I read 2 of them in April, so I'm not going to talk about those. But in my youth, or in my late teens, early 20s, I did read the Hunger Games trilogy, the original books. So we have The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay, and I remember really enjoying them. I actually bought these lovely hardback Scholastic editions, and in that box set is also The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and then I also had pre-ordered Sunrise on the Reaping. So here we are. I bought all 5 books as somebody who's not supposed to be buying books, but I did. But I read them too, so it's okay. I enjoyed these books when I read them originally, but I think at the time I probably didn't have the emotional capacity and the critical thinking skills to really see what these books are. This is a trilogy that really holds up and probably hits harder for me now than ever before. Like, aside from critical thinking, I don't think I had the context, the political, sociological, historical context to really understand what Suzanne Collins did with these books. So the author said that these books were inspired while she was flicking through TV one night and she just saw a reality TV show where people were trying to win money, and then she skipped over and there was footage of the war on Iraq, and just the juxtaposition of these two made her really realize how mad our modern world is. So if you've missed these completely, which look, maybe you have, this trilogy is set in a dystopian future in a world called Panem, and it's divided into districts. So 12 districts. There were originally 13, but there are now 12, and it's ruled by the capital. So the capital are really wealthy and oppressive, and every year as punishment for a past rebellion, the capital enforces these Hunger Games where 2 children from each district are reaped or chosen to go fight in this arena to the death. So a boy and a girl, and the capital watches and all the districts watch as well. But it's sad for the districts because obviously their kids are being murdered essentially, and this is sort of punishment for the revolution that happened and was started by the districts many decades ago, which is supposed to remind people in the districts to never do anything like this again. Awful, right? So the story follows our protagonist, Katniss Everdeen, and she's poor and she grows up in District 12. And I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler because it's very much in the very start of the very first book. Her younger sister Prim ends up being reaped for the Hunger Games, and Katniss volunteers as tribute. So she ends up going to fight in the Hunger Games instead of her younger sister. So we follow her through themes of war, of survival, of propaganda, of revolution, of oppression, of so many different systems at play. What should feel very dystopian series, but somehow feels like, given what's happening in our current climate, not that far outside of the realm of possibility. What struck me reading this trilogy is how sharp the political commentary really is, the way that the books explore power and media manipulation, propaganda and performative politics, and how easily a revolution can become this other version of the thing that it's trying to overthrow, if that makes any sense. It all just feels so on point, like scarily relevant to what's happening nowadays. Collins absolutely doesn't shy away from showing the emotional costs of war and also the psychological costs of war. It's not just about the battles, but it's about the aftermath of these battles and the generational trauma and what happens when people are allowed a little bit too much power. I love that Katniss isn't necessarily your typical chosen one hero either. She's messy, she's traumatized, she's often very unsure of herself, and that makes the whole story feel so much more real and relevant and possible. Is the writing perfect? No. Is the pacing uneven at times? Absolutely. But the ideas behind and within this trilogy and the way it mirrors so many things that are currently happening in the real world, from economic inequality, from inequity, into the way that violence can be packaged and consumed. And reading these books in 2025 particularly, given what's happening, given the wars that we're seeing played out, given the genocides we're seeing played out on our phone screens, given the propaganda that we're witnessing every day, it's incredible. I mean, these books contain a scene where people who are victims of war, who are suffering from war wounds, this hospital is bombed. Like, how on point is that? How many times have we seen that on our phone screens recently? Really sadly. If you've only seen the films, or if you've never seen the films, if you've read the trilogy years ago but haven't read it since, I feel like now is such a good time to pick these books up, not just because of the new installation in the series, but just because of the parallels between what's happening here and what's happening in current day. It's really impressive and also really terrifying. And sure, they are essentially YA books, and they do read as YA books, but there's something really important and really relevant and really special within these books that's just incredible. Honestly, they're so good, and I would 100% recommend picking them up now. So pals, that's me and all of the books that I read in March. Have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know what your favorite book from March was in the comments below. I'd love to know. I love getting recommendations from you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more from me, don't forget to subscribe. I hope you're all having a lovely day, and I'll chat to you next week in another video. Take care. Bye bye.